we should at least give some look at the opponent that they're facing literally this week.
Yeah,
Colorado State.
Yeah, don't sleep on Jay Norvell.
Let's not sleep on them.
Deion almost did last year. I remember watching that.
Almost came back to bite him. That was a heated game. Obviously, hey, it's a bit of a homecoming. I know he coached here for like a season.
He did
as well. So
well, and that's what we remember. He was an assistant under Charlie Strong, and when they hired him, he comes in hot. He brings in some fire, and
saw some dark days here.
He brought in Austin, right? Yes, he did. But yeah, I can remember when Colorado State. I mean, they should have beat Deion in Colorado, but yeah, I think it went to double OT. But it was a fun game. But Norvell is pretty fearless. He gets his guys ready to roll. I know they got a stud receiver. I think he had about 20 catches in that game alone.
Yeah.
And obviously they got some guys that want to be there.
Right.
But saying no to $600K of NIL. But yeah, Colorado State. When you get past all that, they are, I guess, top half of their conference. They're expected to be.
Yeah. I mean, they're coming off 6 straight years of not making a bowl game. And I remember, I grew up in Mountain West Country. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I used to seeing UNM and Colorado State go toe-to-toe with each other. Not a lot of exciting football games, though, I'll say, growing up. But they were always kind of like in that middle tier at the top of the Mountain West relatively up until Boise kind of came in and took over the conference.
Yeah.
But yeah, now they're in the down years, as a program, and they're hoping that they can make it the year to finally get back into that conference's competitive graces.
Hey.
And hey, this is going to be, we talked about what is their Super Bowl, right? I mean, this is your week one. This is where you put all your eggs in the basket. Again, this is all the offseason conversation. If you're Norvell, you're putting on all the game tape from last season, and you're saying, this is Texas. Let's go in there. I mean, we're 30-point dogs. We have nothing to lose, right?
Sure.
And that worked for Wyoming last year, right? Let's not forget that game was way closer than it needed to be, but thankfully we have the home field advantage in this case, and I think that might be the differentiating factor. Yeah,
and this is, Mac Brown used to hate legit week one opponents because this is when you're working at your kinks. This is when you're kind of fine-tuning for week 2, 3, and 4. You need that preseason game. I'm not saying Colorado State's a preseason game, but
you would probably want to play the blind sisters of the poor, et cetera.
But I mean, this is what Texas fans, this is what Sark wants in week one, is a team that, you line up, you should be about 30 points better than. So
I agree. Well, hey, we got some great insight this week.
Yeah.
I talked to an expert on all things Colorado State, Kevin Lytle of the Coloradoan. Kevin, great voice of Colorado State football. Here's my conversation with him. Longhorns open as 35-point favorites. Kevin, what do you think? Do you think that's a fair line for this Rams team?
Yeah, it's one of those. I mean, those lines, once you get, into the 4+ touchdown range, it gets a little wonky. I mean, in some ways, obviously, it doesn't make sense. Texas is, I think, a favorite to be one of the college football playoff participants. Obviously, it's in Austin. I'm going to assume it's going to be blistering hot. Quinn Ewers is Quinn Ewers. And Colorado State is a Mountain West team coming off a 5 and 7 years. So, in those ways, it makes sense. But on the flip side, this is a pretty experienced Colorado State team. Most of their best players, not all, but most of their best players from last season are back. Most of these guys have played in, some of these big environments like this. 2 years ago, Colorado State opened, at Michigan. So a lot of these guys have been in, kind of the big environment type of games. And they can score the ball, which, if you have to cover a 35, 36-point spread, you can't give up many points. In that way, it feels a little high, but certainly understandable with the excitement around Texas that it would be a pretty big line.
Oh, Kevin, you do mention this is an experienced Colorado State team, and two of the most experienced guys there are going to be Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, and Torrey Horton. They were in the headlines this week. Turned down a substantial amount of money to play elsewhere. What have you heard about that?
Yeah, so Braden Fowler, Nicolosi took over at quarterback basically week one last year. Clay Millen was the starter going into the season. It went haywire pretty quickly, and BFN, as fans here called him, took over and really took the reins. He's an aggressive guy, big arm, can make big plays. Also had a lot of interceptions last year. Torrey Horton is one of the best receivers. I think probably the best in the group of 5. He could play just about anywhere. he's been a guy that's had offers, sort of your underhanded third party NIL offers for a while and keeps turning them down. He also could have gone to the NFL after last season and really had a long debate about whether to do that or not. But ended up sticking with, Jay Norvell in this system, to improve his draft stock. And yeah, likewise with BFN, he had offers, again, in this NIL world, there's a lot of that. I broke the story about the BFN's, alleged big offer is back in December, and it kind of just keeps surging forward. Basically they feel that this is a system where they can showcase their talents to lead to the NFL, which is where the, big long-term riches are. And it's also fair to say they're not, playing, for nothing right now at Colorado State. But yeah, it's at least right now for Colorado State fans, it's a great way to, build some loyalty. Those players, certainly are fan favorites right now, and that just makes it more so. So yeah, it's, I guess, kind of just a symptomatic of the modern college football is, if you're a group of 5 player who's, really good, that's going to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I guess that was going to be my question on it too, is like, did these guys have NFL prospects? Were they going to get that money eventually? Because $600,000, if that's true, what was being reported, that's not a little amount of money by any means, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's significant. Torrey Horton, a guy, and he would have been drafted in April if he had left. He's definitely that quality. It was more about where, and the feedback he got from scouts was, obviously a lot positive, but, some of, things that come with being a tall, wiry receiver, add some weight, bulk up, sustainability, that type of thing. So he did that. He's, I've seen some places that say he could be a first round pick next year, so he certainly has early day potential. BFN, it's a little bit more TBD just because he has 11 career starts. So he's pretty, young in his career in a way. But I think there's no doubt if you watch him play, you can see the potential if he, continues to grow and, improve his game and be more consistent. He has a lot of the tools. So yeah, I think no doubt those guys have a chance. And Torrey Horton, I think most specifically and immediately, he'll be probably high on a depth chart in an NFL roster a year from now.
And from my understanding, you have Heisman credentials, Heisman voting credentials. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am a Heisman voter. Last year's my first year.
What do you make of Quinn Ewers? Because we know he's going to be in that race.
Absolutely. He's a guy that has all the tools, obviously a good team around him, which, in theory isn't necessarily part of it, but I think it's naive to say that winning doesn't help a candidate's case. I think he's one of a variety of guys, that the quarterback group this year, I think there's a lot of conversation about, who's going to emerge as the guy. There's a lot of talk out here in Colorado about, Shedeur Sanders as one of them. Obviously Georgia is always in that mix, but Quinn Ewers absolutely is one of those guys right there that could be, the top quarterback this season. And, personally, I'm excited to see him, live and in person week 1. And yeah, a guy that certainly from kind of the Heisman side, I imagine I'll be watching all year long to see how he's doing.
Colorado State, they haven't been bowling in a little bit, 6-year drought. Norvell, he's been over there for a couple of years, going into his 3rd year this season. What do you make of the job he's done? And do you think he has this team ready to break that drought?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. He was in the Mountain West at Nevada, what would have been 21. The last game of the season, ironically, Norvell and Nevada played at Colorado State. Absolutely walloped Colorado State. Steve Adazio got ejected before halftime, and that ended up being basically his last sight as a Colorado State coach. Got fired, and Norvell got hired to replace him, and he was taking over a disaster. Steve Adazio, he was only here 2 years, but it was an awful 2 years. He really ran the program into the ground, and so it was a full rebuild. Year 1 showed that they had a lot of, basically a lot of fixing to do. The team was better last year, but I think it was a letdown to not make a bowl, and expectations are pretty high this year. The schedule in some ways is tough, obviously opening at Texas, but they actually got some breaks in Mountain West play. I think the bare minimum expectation for Colorado State this year is to make the postseason in some form.
Well, that was another interesting thing about BFN and Horton turning down those offers, their goal to win a championship. What does that mean for Colorado State? Because I know it doesn't mean actually holding the college football playoff trophy at the very end. I'm from Mountain West country. I get it. I get the chip on your shoulder from out there. Is that just winning the Mountain West? Would that be the definition of that turnaround?
Yeah, I think that, certainly that's, I think, probably the goal because, not just the Mountain West, any group of five program, if you win your conference championship, you at least have a chance to be in the college football playoff now that's expanded. I certainly think Mountain West teams feel that they have, whoever the Mountain West champion becomes is going to have a good chance to be in the CFP. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of talk of, hey, if you can go win a Mountain West title, you have a good chance to be in the CFP. And certainly for any G5 program, that would be a huge success. Colorado State, because of the schedule, like I say, they don't have to beat Texas, to make the CFP. They can, lose Texas. They have Colorado coming in. If you were to say beat Colorado and win the Mountain West, that's probably a playoff team. So yeah, I think the championship talk is aiming for a Mountain West. And like I say, CSU got some favors in the schedule. They don't play Boise State in the Mountain West, who is obviously a favorite. They avoid San Diego State, who's they're in a coaching change, but generally are pretty solid. So they got pretty favorable scheduling from that standpoint, and some of it is the talk of camp. Every team in college football is optimistic right now. But that I think is sort of the viewpoint of this team of like, hey, if you go win the Mountain West, you get to go where you want to go.
Let's talk a little bit of strengths and weaknesses. I've heard you in past interviews talk about a big weakness for the Rams being their secondary. Have they addressed that? Because the talk around town here in Texas is that we have the deepest wide receiving room since Sark has taken over.
Yeah, well, I mean, talk about a nice challenge off the bat. Heisman Trophy candidate, quarterback, like you say, a bunch of good receivers. That secondary will be tested. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the be-all, end-all analysis of that group. If you give up points to Texas, that's still doesn't mean your season is doomed. But yeah, it's interesting because at safety, there's a lot of experience. Henry Blackburn, Jack Howe, they've played a ton of games for CSU, all conference type players. They should be solid there, but at cornerback, it is a question mark. Dom Jones played a decent bit for the Rams last year. And then after that, they lost one cornerback in Chiggy Anuzium to the NFL, another one, a young guy, TJ Crandall, transferred to West Virginia. So they have holes there. They got a Nevada transfer in Isaiah Sissima, who they're excited about. Some other guys, between youngsters and a couple more transfers. So they've certainly attempted to address it. There have been some good signs in camp, but I think it's definitely one of those that you're going to need to see, on the field how it produces. Because CSU just gave up too many big plays last year.
I know a big concern here is we have to replace Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat along the defensive line. Do the Rams have a running back that could challenge in the interior? Because I know this has been described as more of an air raid style offense.
Yeah, the running back room is really fascinating. Last year, due to injuries, basically the running back room was decimated. They ended up most of the season starting a walk-on at running back who, did the best he could, but, was limited in some ways. But now they have 5 to 6 guys that they really believe in. Justin Marshall, as a true freshman, came in and averaged about 100 yards a game the last 3 games of the season last year. He's in the mix. They have a guy in Kobe Johnson who ended up having medical redshirt last year, but he had more than 2,500 yards at North Dakota State prior to coming to CSU. They have a few other guys. And Norvell has talked about, more balance in the offense. It's still, like you say, it's still technically an air raid offense. They're still going to throw it a lot, but they know they need to control games better at times. If you have a lead in the fourth quarter, you have to find a way to salt that away. And they like their run game, and they're actually really excited about that group this year. It's been quite a change from what they had last year when they were just so limited with injuries.
Let's talk about the Rams pass rush. Last year, they had Muhammad Kamara, a guy that had 13 sacks last year. He's now in the pros, going now against Calvin Banks in this Texas Longhorns offensive line. Calvin Banks, a preseason All-SEC type player. How do you think the Rams are going to do game pressure on the quarterback?
It's still funny hearing all SEC in regards to Texas, but yeah, that's a huge question. Mo Kamara was awesome. 13 and a half sacks, I think it was last year. He's with the Dolphins now. Really good player. It's going to be by committee. I don't think there's any expectation that someone's going to come in and have 13 sacks this season for Colorado State. It's going to be a variety of guys. Newer Gatkuth is probably high on that list. He's a youngster, played a pretty good amount last year. got some tackles for loss, not much in the sack column, but he'll now be the guy that, CSU tries to get on the weakest offensive linemen, especially in pass rush situations. But they have a lot of youngsters in that area that, they're going to have potential, but don't necessarily have the, college resume to show it. So they're going to need some guys to step up. That's definitely, I think they're deeper on defensive line, but maybe a little bit more inexperienced.
Now, what are your expectations for this game and how it plays out? Because I know a lot of Longhorn fans look at this game and think, oh, this is just some Trump Mountain West team that we're bringing in to score 50 on. Again, the betting line being 35. However, I remember a game against Wyoming last year where the Horns only were up a touchdown going into the fourth quarter. So I'm just saying, surprises happen. What do you make of this game and how Norvell and company are going to approach it?
Yeah, I would imagine the Texas staff will probably be pointing that game out to players as well. Make sure, like, hey, let's not sleepwalk through this one. Especially, I believe Texas goes to Michigan the next week. So, I don't want to say trap game. That's way overused and it's week 1. But, you could see how it wouldn't be, the highest profile game on Texas's schedule. CSU, I think, fans are realistic. I think everyone knows this is probably a game CSU loses. But I think most realistically, the thing CSU wants to get is have the offense show some stuff. If you can score some points, move the ball around on Texas, that'll give you confidence, moving into other games that, hey, if we go down to Austin and can score, we're going to be all right. And defensively, yeah, it's going to be a huge challenge. But again, see some positives, see some of those young guys, like I say, newer Gatkuth, if he can, create some problems, get in Quinn Ewers' face as he's, trying to throw. Again, you're not going to face, the talent, moving down the road as they will in Texas. So I think that's a lot of it. And, as far as the line goes, I think CSU folks, fans would like to see a cover there. That's a pretty big line. And if you want to be a big time offense, which CSU thinks it can be, you should be able to cover that one. So, yeah, I think, most people are realistic. It's probably not an upset watch type of game. You never know. But they would like it to be, semi-competitive.
I tell you, if you want to see a bunch of people running around with their head on fire in Austin, if that's a 2-touchdown game, that will be the vibe around town.
Yeah.
After that. But anyway, Kevin Lytle, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your insight. Look forward to week 1, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to Austin.
For the day ones, the diehards, the first-timers, the old-timers, for all the rivalry matches, buzzer beaters, and come-from-behind miracles. It's not just stats and wins and losses, it's the moments, the shots you can't believe went in, the times you can't do anything but believe. And it's all streaming right here on your connected TV anytime on Fox Local.
The Sports Office, streaming anytime on Fox Local.